Cora is addressing a tough and important question, to drive or not to drive. So I'm delighted she's here to share her knowledge and expertise with us. Please welcome Cora.
Thank you, Virginia. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As Dr. Hinshaw mentioned, I have the best job in the hospital. And I want to give you a little background on this. I'm the only person whose job description can be summarized as going out into the community in order to convince you all to not become our patients. We do not want your business. And if you come in to see us, that's my fault, because I'm trying to keep you out. So, a little bit of background about the Queens Medical Center. We are the only level 2 verified trauma center in the state of Hawaii. We serve the entire Pacific Basin, and we are busting at our seams. We're completely full every day, all night, with people who have unintentional injuries. And if you look at the stats, for people living in Hawaii and America, ages 1 through 44, unintentional injuries are the leading cause of death. And then as we get over 45, it's not that injuries become fewer, it's that then the other diseases, the actual diseases, start kicking in. So what we're talking about is our number 2 cause of trauma admissions. Number 1 is falls. That's another topic for another day. But we want to talk about motor vehicle and traffic safety. This is a touchy subject. As Virginia was mentioning with her father, he was not interested in stopping driving. So I wanted to say this is what we believe, because I want to set the tone for the conversation, because this is a conversation, and I'm asking you to continue the conversation much longer after we leave today. So what we believe is that driving should always be focused on ability and not age. There is nobody in this room who thinks that we should have a magic number at which point you turn in your keys and you turn in your license and who knows what you do. We also believe that it's true. We want to acknowledge that there are medical conditions that cause problems. They're worrisome, especially those that are impacting our brains, right? We can all agree on that. But we also know that knowledge is power. So understanding not just the disease processes, but also the medications that are prescribed to us. These are the things that are going to help us to make our decisions. And finally, we believe that when it is time to give up the keys, that this process should always be done with compassion and dignity. It shouldn't be something that leaves people feeling isolated and unempowered in the process. Okay, why are we talking about this? Last summer, there was a really scary NHTSA report that came out. So this is from our federal government. And every year, they look at all of our traffic crashes and they tally them up. And every year, what we've found from 1965 is that our numbers are going in the correct direction. Our numbers are getting smaller. Fatalities are being driven down. And then something happened last year. And nationwide, our fatalities went up 7.2%. And this was a much larger increase actually for pedestrians. We saw the same thing in Hawaii. But I saw that number, 7.2%, and I went and I talked to our state injury epidemiologist, and I said, what about Hawaii? We're better, right? And here's what he said. We're looking at 2014, there were 95 fatalities statewide. 2015, there were 93 fatalities. Go back a few years, we're bumping around there, 93, 95. And then all of a sudden, what happened? So in our year-to-year transition, we went up 29%. 29%. So if you look at some of the bills that have been proposed in our legislature this year, they're in direct reaction to this number. What's happening? We don't exactly know. We're still waiting for some of the data. We're waiting to see our toxicology results, but we suspect that there is more medical marijuana that people are being prescribed. There are a lot more pills out there that people are saying, oh, you know, I injured my back and now I have to take these medicines and I'm still going to drive when they shouldn't be driving. There's also just distraction. We've seen a lot more red light running And when somebody runs a red light, who is it who's getting hurt? Is it the red light runner or the car that they T-bone? Is it the person who causes the crash, or is it the innocent person who dies? It's the innocent person. So one of those bills that's out there before our lawmakers right now is the red light running camera. So they want to ask us, is it okay to take pictures of people as they run red lights and send them a ticket? And I would say yes. Based on what we're seeing in our trauma center, that would make a huge difference. Another theory out there is that it might be aging drivers. That's a theory, but we need to look at the data. But why do we care? We care because there are headlines like this. And it's not just a headline, these are people. We had a 75, who was crossing in a marked crosswalk last year, and her life was ended. She was going about her daily life, her rituals, getting the newspaper, and she was killed. And she was killed not just by anyone, but by a 90-year-old driver, who I would say at that point, he probably felt like his life was over as well. So we all know people who have been involved in these crashes, and we know that there's a very human side to all of the statistics. Okay, when we say older driver, what are we talking about? I was looking for a good definition, so I thought we'd ask Einstein, and Einstein tells us it's all the theory of relativity, right? So it's anyone 10 years older than me is older, or 65. So today we're going to use the definition of 65, but if you are looking at signing up for some of the driver safety courses, it's going to say 50. So just know that there's a mixed or sliding definition, but we're going to go with 65. Okay, this one, sorry, our slides color didn't work out quite right. But what I will say is that the good news is that older drivers tend to be safer. There's fewer crashes. And this is because people self-regulate. They start reducing their vehicle miles traveled. They're much more cautious. We don't hear about 90-year-olds getting cell phone tickets, right? Or texting, like you guys aren't the ones who are out there texting. So in general, you're a much safer driver. The bad news, though, is that when you are in a crash, that you have less functional reserve capacity. You tend to be frailer. Bones don't heal quite as quickly. And so there are more deaths. So the acuity is higher. And here is the crux of what we're talking about today. So this is what I'd like you to burn into your eyeballs, and it's going to be a metaphor. I'd like to create a metaphor with you, and that's the metaphor of bookends for driving. So we all know that it takes us about 15 years before we're tall enough and mature enough to drive. My son, Rowan, is sitting over there. He's 9 years old, and he's too short. He couldn't drive if he wanted to because he can't see over the steering wheel. He needs to be a little bit taller. We all agree on that. But then we get to this middle point. So around our mid-teens, we begin to drive, and we drive, and we drive for decades. Maybe we drive until we're 80, and we're completely fine. And our brains tell us, if I've been doing something for decades, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is normal, this is healthy. And so that's why it comes as such a surprise when, voila, I'm asking you this question in white: how long does the average American driver outlive his or her driving ability? And the answer is something that we need to absorb. We really need to accept this as a fact, and that's 7 to 10 years that each of us is going to be without our cars. What are we going to do? That's why we're here. That's why we want to talk about it. We want to find that point. We want to find this point. We want to have a better understanding of how do we know when we're at that point, and once we're transitioning, what are we going to do? So our goals for today, we are going to try an exercise routine that's specific for driving. We are going to open up the goodie bags that I gave you, and we're going to pull out our self-assessment. We're not going to do all the math because Americans tend to be really bad at math, and I don't want to work your brains that hard right now. We're also going to learn some conversation tips for when it comes time to hang up the keys. Like, how do we have that conversation? And we're going to plan for our transportation future. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is have our exercise break. So you can, actually right now, can everyone close whatever on your lap and put it under your chair? And kind of clear out a place for your feet, because you are going to be standing up. We are going to do an exercise break utilizing a song. And somewhere over here, we have Rebecca. Rebecca, would you mind standing up, please? So Rebecca's wearing a yellow vest. You too can win a reflective vest in a couple of ways. After the talk, if you've got questions, the first 10 people will also get a vest who ask a question. But also right now, there's a quiz. So we're going to do an exercise routine to a Beatles song from Rubber Soul. Who can tell me what song on Rubber Soul would be most appropriate for today? You're going to win a vest. Who said that? Yay, you're totally right. Here. So we are going to, there you go. We're going to do a little exercise routine. And this one was designed to address some of the physical tasks of driving. So in order to drive, we need to do some things. We need to be able to confidently press the gas and the brake pedal. So we need to have ankle flexibility. We need calf strength. We need to be able to grasp the steering wheel. Our wrists need to be limber. We also need to be able to turn our heads in order to check for blind spots, check maybe to see if a bicyclist or a pedestrian is coming, especially if we're on that King Street, near the King Street bike lane, you know what I'm talking about, and you want to turn left, you need to be looking way, way, way left, and then right, and then left, and then right and left, and maybe you don't even want to turn. Okay, so we are going to do a little routine. We're going to start seated. If you would like to stand up at a certain point when I stand up, feel free to do so. You don't have to. If you feel like you look silly, we all look silly. So you don't have to do that exercise routine. I made that one up, and I based it on the AARP Safe Driver course. But come up with something. Think about those activities that you need for driving and do them. Also, if everybody has water, drink water. Okay, so we're also going to do a self-assessment. There are many different assessments out there. We have a AAA Roadwise review. This is an online assessment. There's the AARP in a classroom assessment. There's a paper one, which you have in a booklet in all of your bags. And then one of my favorite ones is just the natural assessment, which is look at your passengers' faces. And if they're making a face like this dog, whoa, you might want to do a different assessment. Yeah, so the dog looks a little bit shocked. But for today, we are going to do the one that I'm most familiar with. So if you look in your bag, so in your plastic bags, you should have a piece of paper, one that's yellow and one that's blue, green. One of them should look like this, AARP, Judging My Driving. And you don't actually have to do this today, but I would like you to just read through. We're just going to take a minute, and I would like you to just kind of read through what it says. So this is the blue sheet of paper that you all have, AARP, Judging My Driving. So go ahead. Everyone should have it in their plastic bag packet. And what I like about this particular one is that it focuses on feelings. And rather than behaviors, it focuses on your sense of trepidation. You know, are you feeling nervous about left-hand turns? Do you feel like people are honking at you more often? Because these are the things that stick with us. We don't always remember the number of times people have honked at us, but we remember that feeling that maybe we're not doing something quite right. So later, and we don't have to actually do this right now, but I want you to start thinking about this and maybe do a more in-depth assessment of yourself at home when you can really think about this and then add it up. But what you're going to do is add it up. If you check the never box, the one on the far right, you get 0 points against you. If it's occasionally, you get 1, frequently 2, and always 3. So if you always feel nervous, agitated, or irritated or aggressive when driving, you get 3 points for that, if that's a constant thing. So you're going to add it all up. So what you're going to do when you score yourself, and again, I'm not asking you to score yourself today, because you might need a calculator, unless you're adding up all zeros, is that if you get 0 to 5 points, you're pretty much all clear today, but things change. The only constant in life is change. And so I want you to reassess yourself every single year. If you are scoring in the mid-range of 6 to 15 points, at that point, I'm thinking there's probably some other classes you might want to take. And if you score even higher, 16 or above, there are some formal assessments out there in our community that are available now that weren't available last year. So we're moving in a good direction for that. What if you're concerned not about yourself, but about somebody else? Let's say you read through these questions on the blue sheet and you say, I'm fine. I've only got 4 points, but my husband, he is not driving the way that he should, or my best friend. She's always been a little bit wild, but now she's a little maybe unhinged on the roads. So if you're concerned, just know that, number one, this is an uncomfortable topic. Nobody says, I think it would be a really fun thing to potentially damage my friend's ego or to damage my friendship. So luckily, there have been some studies about who should do the talking to whom. And studies show that 40% of people want their physician to talk to them about driving. But when I talk to our physicians, they don't know how to talk about driving, and they don't like to talk about driving because it's their business. They want you to come in and see them, and if you feel uncomfortable coming in to see them, you're not going to come back to see them. So they don't necessarily want to talk. 50% of people say that they would prefer that their spouse be the one to come in and talk to them first. However, 15% never want their spouses to talk to them. Maybe their spouses talk to them all the time about their driving, and they really don't appreciate it. But in general, we also know that nobody wants to have the police or our trauma surgeons talking to them about their driving. Because if that's the case, something's already happened. So, speaking of something's already happening, these are 2 photos that we got from the Star Advertiser. One of them was from a parking deck. Somebody drove right, they put their car into the wrong gear. They thought they were going in one direction. Instead, they drove right off the parking deck. And then the other one, we did have a 77-year-old who admittedly mixed up the gas and the brake pedal. That was in the Hawaii Kai post office. And that was one of those situations where when we talked to their family members, they said, oh, you know what? We really, really, really should have said something earlier because we knew that she shouldn't have been driving. We saw the signs and, we feel really badly now. So my question is, what if someone had had the talk with these people beforehand? We probably could have had a different outcome. So how would we start a conversation? Let's say that you've taken the assessment, you've decided you're fine as a driver, but you know someone that you might want to talk to them about it. One thing you do is you talk about current events, and you say, hey, did you hear about that driver who just drove through the post office in Hawaii Kai? What do you think about that? And you can start from there. You can also think back to a moment that happened recently with that person driving, and you can say, that was a really close call. I worry about your safety. Or if you know someone has recently been diagnosed with something, or maybe they've talked about this new blood pressure medication that their doctor just gave them, hey, have you asked your doctor about the drug-drug interactions, or about your dosage, or about how this might impact your driving? We can also drive down memory lane together. Hey, do you remember when the Poly Highway used to be the old Poly Highway and it was so much more beautiful and drivers weren't as irritating? But things are changing, and get the ball rolling that way. Things are changing. Or ask, how did Uncle stop driving, Mom? I remember he stopped, but what was his process? We can also start with how we feel, because it's very, very difficult for someone to argue with my feelings. I feel this way. I'm relieved that you stopped driving over the Poly at night. Or I'm concerned that you get lost on the way back from Long's. That's a very common thing that we hear families talking about is, my dad got lost on the way home. Just a couple blocks from home, he got lost. Or saying, I'm afraid, I'm feeling fearful to let our grandkids ride with you. So these are all things that you can start with. It's also best to always focus on the positive. So you can talk about things like, hey, let's practice something together. You got a new phone, let's put the Uber app on. And let's just practice together. And I think I've got a code that we could try out together. Or practicality and dreaming. And actually, I'm going to borrow your packet right here for a second. So if we go into this booklet right here that you all have, there's actually a section in here, a budget section, that talks about how much money you could save if you got rid of your car. So some people are very much wedded to their independence with driving. But they're also really wedded to their money. And they're living on a fixed income. And if you were to turn to page 19 in your book, there's vehicle cost per year, the annual cost. And sometimes people look at this and they say, oh, wow, I could save $20,000 a year if I got rid of my car. And then your question to them is, well, what could we do with that money? How could that help us? Could we take that trip that we keep putting off because we haven't saved quite enough? Again, focusing on the positive, highlight the small changes that have been made, and ask to see more of those. And maybe suggest, I'll pick you up. I love it when I pick you up, Mom, because then we get to have this time in the car together. You're not a burden. This is something that I look forward to doing all week. Or theoretical, because this is a really important question to get to understand where a person's coming from. Is it more important that you get to where you're going, that you get to the temple and you get to spend time with your friends, or is it more important that you drive? Because some people, it really is important that they drive. That's where their sense of self comes from. They're driving their friends. But for most of us, we just want to get to where we're going, and it doesn't really matter how we get there as long as we can get there. We should always expect, though, that when we're talking to someone, that they're going to disagree with us. And they can disagree. You can say, you got 2 big dents on your car. And they can say, no, that's just 1. They can disagree with that. But again, they can't disagree with your feeling. They might go through a period of depression at the thought of not being that person who drives their friends around. How am I going to get to see my friends? There's that fear of becoming a burden. And that's a real fear. And sadness at the thought of fewer social opportunities at first, until we brainstorm some ways to get around. But even if you fear that these are things that are going to be brought up for the other person, do not postpone the conversation. If you have real concerns, listen to yourself. Listen to those concerns and do something. Resources in our community. Again, we have some tests. Some of them are paper-based, like the one from AARP. There's the Roadwise Review. This is a really good online one, and it's free. You set it up in your living room. Nobody knows if you pass or fail, what the answers are. Also, this booklet, all the booklets that you have are going to help to guide you through some of the big questions, and then, of course, your friends. Okay. There are also classes. So you can come to Queens and you can put in a half day or a full day with me or with somebody else who's a volunteer who's been trained up to lead these courses. And It's a great book. I refer to this all the time, and I took the class first just to become familiarized with the content. It's terrific. I mean, there's stuff in here that any driver of any age could benefit from knowing. So I highly recommend that you take this class. You can also get a discount on your insurance. You take the class, you send in your certificate, or you tell Geico, I took the class, and bam, it's not just 15% off of your bill, it's a little bit more than that. So think about that, about the long-term discounts and also savings in being a better driver. So AARP Drive Smart, if you go to the AARP website, just look there and there's going to be a list. So they're at Kaiser, at Queens. I think the different Kaisers have them. Also Lanakila Senior Center. It's taught there. And then if you're looking for one to come to your specific area, you could probably just write on the website and say, look, we really need something in Ka'ava. And I might volunteer to go out and do that. If there's a need, I would definitely go to where that place of need is. CarFit. Has anyone here heard of CarFit or done CarFit? Okay, so we've got a couple of CarFit people. Are you volunteers? Have you volunteered with them or trained up? No. Okay, so CarFit is something, it's very big on the mainland. It's not as big here yet, but it's a 12-point vehicle inspection. We're not checking the oil and the fluids. We are checking to see how you fit in the vehicle and to see if you know about the safety features of your vehicle and how we can make them work better. So I'm looking around. I'm looking for a petite person. So we have a couple of very petite people. So one of the things I learned that was very shocking is that if you're particularly short or particularly tall, that what you see out of your windshield is actually warped because there's some curvature to your windshield. So if you're really tall, we really can't do anything for you. Sorry. I'm looking at you. But if you're more on the petite side, at the CarFit event, we might suggest something that's a little bit like a booster seat for you. You know how there's booster seats for kids? We don't want it to be so tall that you can't reach the pedals, but we want it to be tall enough so that you're seeing clearly above your above the steering wheel, which I know it's one of those things that people joke about with aging drivers, but it's real. This thing right here is another thing that we recommend in CarFit. It's basically like a lazy Susan for your butt. So imagine for a second that you have, maybe you've got some arthritis in your knee, or you've had surgery, or for some reason your spine isn't as mobile as it used to be. We can open up the car door. Yes, maybe somebody helps me to sit down, and then, I can swivel right in. So there are little things that are fairly inexpensive that can help your vehicle to fit you better, and because it fits you better, it's safer. We also look at your seat belts. A lot of our seat belts are now adjustable. You know why they're adjustable? It's especially the ones that are newer. So after 2011, our federal government finally said, you know what, we need to have a female crash test dummy. You know why? In all of our crashes, when we have a man and a woman in the vehicle together, I don't care where they're sitting, as long as they're not sharing the same seat. It doesn't matter where they're sitting. When you are in a crash, the woman is pretty much always injured worse. And why is that? Is that because we're the fairer sex and we're not strong? No, that is not the reason. The reason is that all of our manufacturers designed their vehicles to pass the test. And the test uses a 6-foot-tall, 200-pound male crash test dummy up until 2011. That was the test. And then after 2011, now our vehicles have seat belts that adjust to fit the average American woman who's 5'2". Okay? So that's one of the things we look for. We want to see, is the seat belt fitting you where it's not going to hurt you in a crash? So we go through all these things. We offer free education. The whole program is free. We're not trying to make any money off of anybody. It's similar to the car seat program, which I run for little kids at Queens. And then we also work with occupational therapists who can actually say, I'm seeing a little bit more of an issue here, and this is something you might want to talk to your doctor about or get a prescription to see an OT, and they can help better. And then finally, this would be like the major level of intervention. If you're looking for an actual driver rehab specialist, we finally have one in our state. Her name is Whitney, and she works at Rehab Hospital of the Pacific. And she is awesome to work with. Everyone who takes their $300 out of their pocket and hands it to her, because insurance doesn't cover it, everyone says, grumble, grumble, I don't want to pay this. And then they say, this was the best $300 I've spent on myself in a long time. What they do at Rehab Hospital is they go through a clinical evaluation, and then they also have the road test and a computerized test as well. So they go through vision and hearing, concentration, both with paper and on a computer simulation test, cognition. They look at any sort of metabolic issues. Do you have diabetes or pre-diabetes? Do you have any thyroid issues? What's going on? And then also, what kind of medications are you on? Which brings me to another point, medicine. Even if you don't want to spend $300 to go to Rehab Hospital, you can still ask your pharmacist for a free medication review. And I would suggest that you do this every single year, at least once a year. And here's why. The things that actually impact our driving, we know if we have glaucoma or cataracts, that's going to impact our driving, right? Or if we have a cardiac event and we have new medications, these are all going to impact our driving. The conditions themselves can impact us. But more than that, it's the medicines that we take to treat the conditions that impact our driving. So again, if I have arthritis in my knees because I ran too many marathons, true story, then I might think to myself, I'm going to take Tylenol PM. And at my age, I'm 38, I can take that Tylenol PM, and overnight, the PM part of it, which is really Benadryl, is more or less going to clear out of my system. It's got a half-life anywhere of 4 to 8 hours in my body. In your body, it might be 24 hours. So the medicine that you took yesterday, last night, 2 days ago, might still be impacting your driving ability today. And it's really important to talk to your doctor, and not just your doctor though, your pharmacist, and say, okay, this is everything that I take. Honestly, this is everything I take. Include alcohol in there, because alcohol would be the number one medicine that we as Americans prescribe ourselves. So include that and ask for that medication review to tell you about drug-drug interactions, drug-food interactions, time of day, because these are all really important. And as we age, we get more prescriptions, and things start interacting with each other. So, summary: if you have concerns, talk to your doctor or pharmacist. Number one, do that self-assessment every year because we know things change. Register for CarFit. You can go onto the CarFit website and you can say, when is it going to happen again? Or you can call AARP and say, I want it to happen again. Can we bring people to wherever that is? You can also register for one of those safety courses, like the AARP course. And then, of course, contact Rehab Hospital if you think that there's a more serious issue. Okay, so I'm also going to say that that's all the bad news, but the good news is that there's never been a better time to not drive. And that's because of technology. And I'm one of those people that I look at technology and I say, I'm not personally an early adopter. I don't see an iPhone and immediately want it. It takes me many, many years before I start doing those things. But then I realize, okay, it's not so bad. So there are technologies out there that we can utilize. This is not technology necessarily. We'll get to that. But if you're looking for ways to get around Oahu, if you want to get to your doctor's appointment, most hospitals have a van. And we'll come and we'll pick you up. And we'll take you to your doctor's appointment and we'll take you back. There is the bus, the handy van, Catholic Charities. Fewer people have heard of Project Donna. Has anyone here worked with Project Donna? So the word Donna is Sanskrit, I think for compassion, I want to say. And not only do they do things like come into your house and install a grab bar in your shower, but they can also drive you around. And then there's taxis, Lyft, and Uber. So a note about Uber, I wore a red dress because Oprah Winfrey once offered everyone in the audience a free car. And as much as I would love to offer everybody a free car, I can't do that, but I can offer you a free car ride with Uber. So I did call Uber and I said, look, I'm giving this talk and I feel like there's probably people out there who've been waiting for a good reason to try Uber. And they gave us this code. So you can write it down. So if you download the Uber app, maybe it's you and a friend. And you decide you want to go to, you want to go someplace that traffic is going to be bad and parking's going to be bad, but you use your code to get there, and then your friend uses her code to get you back. So you can try that. One of the safety features that I appreciate about Uber is that you can also have your friends follow you. You can enter in a friend, and that friend is then going to be watching your little dot travel around on the screen to make sure that you actually get to where you wanted to go. So in terms of safety, I think it's pretty neat. And I know the taxi cabs don't do that. The bus doesn't do that. But that's something that you might want to try. But your code is only good through Cinco de Mayo. Okay, so if you're planning on going out drinking on Cinco de Mayo, maybe don't rely on this code. Plan to pay. Okay, so there's also self-driving cars. And a few weeks ago, I was able to test drive a self-driving car. And I did this because Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which I'm on the board of, they recently put out a nationwide press release saying that they are in support of self-driving car technology. And I thought, well, that's nice for like 20 years in the future. But it turns out it's here today, right now. So I've got a little video. And I also invited the Tesla rep to come in. Her name is Marie. She's in the back. So if you guys wanted to sign up for a free test drive or a ride along, do it. It is the most exhilarating thing that you've ever done. You know, Disney World, be darned. You know, this was way more exciting. So I'm just going to show you like 2 minutes of this. So my point isn't that you should go from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds on any of our roads, because there's a lot of potholes to fall into. But my point is that there is technology that exists today for us, that if you're looking to buy a car and you're thinking, I've just been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and I don't want to give up my driving ability, this is something that is new. It costs a lot, but it's something to consider because it's an alternative and it's here. Okay, so in summary, the only constant is change. Our abilities, our roads, our vehicles, and our laws are always changing. So knowledge is what's going to keep us living to our full potential. We need to know what our alternatives are, what our limitations are, and we need to plan ahead for the future. We probably won't drive forever, so now is the time to plan ahead when we're still driving. Because our average American driver outlives our ability by how long? 7 to 10 years. Very good. So every day, come up with your exercise routine. Yearly, do your self-assessment. Review the materials as needed. Try these new resources in our community. And talk to your friends and your loved ones about eventually what are you going to do when you do hang up the keys. And then finally, advocate to improve our systems. And I think we're not going to do any case studies. We'll just open it up for questions.